So you experienced this morning just a little bit of what we'll experience tonight and next Sunday night, and I hope that you'll be back with us for that. Didn't they do a great job, the children and the choir? I appreciate them all so very much. Give them a hand. That's great. Boy, I tell you what, if you've ever sung in one of those things, it's a little tough sometimes because the words don't always come out exactly like we think they ought to, because it's not always traditionally how songs are sung. Matter of fact, it reminds me of a story about a little boy and girl who were at church, and they were excited about what they were going to be doing in the Christmas program. And so that night and that day, they were trying to show their grandparents so excitedly about their Christmas carols that they had learned at church. And so they started out, and the little boy said, "Well, I'm going to sing first." And he started out with Silent Night. So beautifully he sang to them, "Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is quiet." And he went along with it. And he got to that last section of Silent Night when it said, and he started out and he blurted it out so beautifully, "Sleep in heavenly beings." And his little sister said, "No, dummy, it's peas, peas." All right, so, you'll get that one in a minute. Oh, how we do those things sometimes. Just as the little children in this story misunderstood the words that they were singing. I sometimes wonder if we've just not misunderstood what Christmas is all about and how to celebrate it the right way. In 353 A.D., Pope Julius I declared that December the 25th was the day that we're going to celebrate the birth of Christ. Now, whether that's accurate or not, it's probably questionable, but that's when we celebrate it. And I wonder, in 353 B.C., if anyone had ever imagined what Christmas would be like today. I doubt it very seriously, don't you? Today our world is filled with celebrations. As a matter of fact, one of the great drives over the last few years, which is just really disheartening to me, is that we have come to the point where we've solely forsaken what Christmas is all about, to the point that we don't want to call it Christmas anymore. We've got all kinds of terminologies that's taken out of many other areas of our life. And they don't want to talk about Christmas, except the merchandisers don't mind, do they? They like to talk about it a lot. I mean, listen, it's so commercialized. And so oftentimes the true reason for our celebration has absolutely been ignored. So this morning we're going to examine in Jesus' own words why he came. Matter of fact, Jackie read that to you this morning. He read you one of the traditional, is Luke's account of the birth of Christ that we read oftentimes at this time. But whenever you really want to understand why we have a reason for a season like this, wouldn't it be better to go and talk with the one who actually came that we celebrate at this time? As a matter of fact, in that 19th chapter, you will find Jesus stating one of those phrases that he does throughout the New Testament when he tells us why we have Christmas. Why we have celebrated a time when Jesus arrived on the face of the earth to come to us. Matter of fact, if you'll read the entirety of that discourse in the 19th chapter, you will find a very interesting story about a guy who so wanted to understand and meet Jesus, and although he was small of stature, he climbed a tree to try to figure out how in the world he could get to Jesus. And he watched him as the crowds were around him. And you know the story of Zacchaeus, don't you? How that Jesus came into his life that day. How he went to his house and had everything changed for his life. What did Jesus say? Why did he say that he came on earth? Wouldn't it have been better for him if he had stayed in all the glory of heaven with all of the wonderful majestic things that must be there? I mean, we just catch a little glimpse in the scripture of the beauty of heaven. Can you imagine wanting to leave there to come here? Can you imagine wanting to leave all of his deity and his power and the ability that he had there and all of his attributes to compress himself, being yet fully God, into the smallest and most helpless of all human forms, a baby? That's just a little mind-boggling, isn't it, to me? But yet it happened. So what did Jesus say? He said, "I came to seek and to save those which were lost." I came to make a remedy for the lostness of this world. That's what Jesus himself said. Here we see the heart of God and literally his purpose why Jesus arrived on the face of the earth. The Bible tells us he came to reconcile man with God. Now we talk about lostness, and what was lost in the Garden of Eden was that God wanted to have fellowship with man. Matter of fact, he came daily. He gave man and he created him. When he saw the garden, he said it was a beautiful place and it was good. But he said something's missing. And on that last day of his creation process, not only did he create man, but he formed woman to walk beside of him. And the Bible tells us that when he saw the earth with human beings here, the ones he had created, the original ones, Adam and Eve, he said it's very good. But there was a problem, wasn't there? And the problem was sin, for Satan came soon after that. Even when God had been there and they were given the roles that they were to do, they were to tend the garden, to name the animals, and all of the things that they were told to do. And there was one negative commandment, and that was they were not to eat of this tree of the fruit of good, of knowledge of good and evil. God didn't want them to know anything about the misery that could come in a world without him. And what happened? Well, just like some of us, when we see a wet paint sign, do not touch, just have to check how wet it is. None of you would ever do that, would you? How many sidewalks have you walked by where it said wet concrete and you see many days later and years later somebody's put their initials there? They just didn't believe it, did they? And so somehow Adam and Eve, just like us today, thought, well, it's no big deal. But it was a big deal, wasn't it? It was a big deal, and the result was brokenness and lostness. The big deal was that they were cast out of the Garden of Eden. The big deal was that they couldn't no longer talk with God like they once did, because he came and he wanted to have fellowship with them, and he came in the cool of the evening wanting to talk with them, but he couldn't find them. God knew where they were at, but they had hid themselves because finally it was exposed that they had sinned against God. Brokenness. They were lost in their journey. And that's what Jesus said, wasn't he? For he saw people just like that. Matter of fact, one passage of Scripture tells us that he looked over Jerusalem one day and he looked at the people there and he said, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often would I have gathered you up as a hen does her chicks under her wings, and you would not come unto me. And I believe in the context of that Scripture there were tears in his eyes when he did it. Our lostness is the reason for the season. But he didn't want to leave us that way, did he? And even before the foundations of the earth, he made a way. Before man ever entered the Garden of Eden, God knew and understood our frailties and our imperfections and the problems that we would have in our lives. And so what did he do at that particular time? He offered a solution to our brokenness, our brokenness. Man, sometimes it's tough, isn't it? I remember my dad used to tell this story on me, and some of you could reflect upon that. He said oftentimes at Christmas time, or when I got a new toy or something, I was very inquisitive about it, and oftentimes I would want to look at it, and I would bring it back, and it might be in multiple pieces. Sometimes I got it together, sometimes I didn't. And he said my favorite phrase when I was a little boy was I would have it in my hand, and they'd say, what happened? He said, I broke it. You ever break anything that way? Our lives are broken, aren't they, without Christ? I mean, we can't get it right, can we? How many times in struggles have we done trying to get it right and find no purpose or hope, and we find joy and pleasure for short periods of time, but that inner happiness we can't find it. And that's what it is. We are broken without Jesus. Not only that he brought the heart of God with his purpose, his messianic mission was both, according to this particular passage, not just to fix the brokenness, but to hunt out those which were broken. He said, I came not only to fix it, but I came to seek you.